His buddy.
You got the doctor in case we don't know what to do.
You got the brain surgeon without a brain. He's got a gun in one hand.
I got my buddy holding it.
His buddy.
You got the doctor in case we don't know what to do.
You got the brain surgeon without a brain. And how's this for cool stuff? Jimmy's got, what do you got, 2,000 control horns in here?
Yeah, right.
Oh my God, there's control horns everywhere. Oh,
Make me nervous to drop bushings.
Oh, don't drop the bushings. Just another day in Wendy's shop. Just another day at the insane asylum. You got that on there yet?
I'm not getting enough deflection. I think I got to group this.
This is the whole deal. Once Mike has acquired the skills from El Mundro, he passes them on to the other El Mundro, who then goes home and passes them on to another El Mundro. This is another definition of the blind leading the blind.
I could have done this wrong myself.
Yeah, you didn't have to come over here to do it wrong. Yeah, God, no wonder I can't make any money. Now, one thing about Wendy, when he's wrong, he's perfectly willing to admit it. It's a real test of manhood when a man is willing to admit he's wrong. Well, let me explain. Last tape, what I tried to explain, but when I went back and looked at the tape, and some of them had already been sent out, so I didn't want to leave this in limbo. If you start with a 3/8 rod and another rod to make a flap. Now, I tried to explain this, but I could see by when I looked at the tape, and if I didn't already send copies out, I could just go back and erase it, but better to make a correction. And you take half of this material away. Now, one of the things that I thought I was clear about, but obviously I'm not, that's why I have that problem. Anyway, what happens is you take half of this away. Let me just go through this because this is a key thing. Now, I did a test myself, and I was wrong. Now, in the past, if you use a flat table like this, and you had just carved this, and it had a taper in it, meaning that this end would now come down to here, which is what I thought Mike had done. Okay, what happens is you have built one side of the flap flat, and even though the other side is flat, it has an angle. And if you were to put one up and one down, it would be a problem. What Mike had done, and we went back again and did a little test just to see if it worked, and it does work, is he had taken half of the amount. He used a double size rod, taken half of the amount, then flipped it over and taken the other half out with a smaller rod. And that left the center line where it should be. So, and assuming the wood wasn't warped, you do it in 2 steps. The third step is you already have the angle in there, and you have to be careful because that throws this angle off. But it does work if you do it in 2 steps. So, with my apologies, and everybody out there knows I'm real quick to apologize when I know I'm right. The second cut would be you'd put this on, it would already have that angle cut. This would be the cut side, and then you'd have to take the second half off. You'd have to do it in 2 steps. And I'm going to guess this is going to be 3/8, quarter, eighth. I'm guessing that's what it is. So if you look at this, if this is 3/8, trying to make this make sense, and this is quarter, and this is eighth, then it would result in, you would think, the center line would still be in the middle and in the middle. And what we did is we made a test flap out of a piece of scrap wood just to see if it worked, and it did. So, with that in mind, let me send out free pizza to everybody. Forget it. The pizza's already... Where's the pizza? In the trash, Mike?
Yeah, it's gone.
Okay, but I would like to make that correction. But the one thing you never want to do, and might as well put this on the tape right now because Joe Adamusco ran into this. When we made the Spitfire flaps, Joe made a jig where one side of it was the thickness of the flap, and then he cut the outline of the flap. This is on the Spitfire videos, by the way. And then in the back, he put a piece of sheet metal, the thickness that he wanted the flap to end. Then cut the piece of wood. So from the side, what this looked like is he had basically a jig that looked like this with sheet metal edges, and then he carved that flap in, but he only carved one side. The thing is, when you're doing this method, you've got to carve both sides. Now Joe already has made the correction, and by the way, the person who gets credit for bringing this to our attention is old Big Jim, and certainly one of the brightest people I've ever known. But he looked at the jig at the stunt form and said, and I thought, oh, it's flat, but I never took into account you do carve that angle in, and it's especially bad on an elliptical flap. So with that in mind, again, we like to have all points of view. Just like the election, we're going to recount the votes, but Windy isn't going to win. Lesson to learn is, remember, it's always okay to admit you're wrong. It shows true manhood, true birdhood. Pick out the lightest horn. You got to weigh every one, Mike. I don't think so. All right, you want to set that the first thing. Mike's going to set up to do that tail. To make the elevators, just let's take into account that, look, it's perfect on the last rib. So build it up to this rib, then we'll put the thing in here, and put a 1/4 inch cap here, and then you'll be able to, in other words, this last piece, you don't need a sheet. You'll put a block in here. So just build the elevator to this size.
Okay.
You would have scraped that off so you don't get a ginch in there. Okay, and you got that. Okay, now watch. Mike's going to build a whole set of elevators in, what, 15 minutes?
Yep, before you leave.
Before I leave. I have to go to the hospital to see my mother, and I've challenged him to see if he can get these elevators done before I leave.
It'll be done.
You know what? He lies, though.
It'll be done.
He's worse than lying. He's deceiving me.
It'll be done.
All right, put them together.
It'll be done.
Way to speed up Mike's production. We just put Fiddler on the Roof CD in, and he works at about 3 times the normal speed. Problem is, the normal speed is not that fast, so it almost comes out to, I don't know here. All right, watch this. In a matter of 30 seconds, he's going to make elevators.
Okay.
The amazing Mike Kajeski, soon to be a Fiddler on the Roof. Step 1 is cut the sheet. Step 2, install the ribs. We're going to follow him through this, but with Fiddler on the Roof playing, I'll bet he's going to go like lightning. And you got to make 2 sets now. One for Ostello. Oh, man.
Is that the deal?
So when you tool up, okay, first thing is we want to trace out all the rib stations. Now there's no taper in these elevators. They're constant chord, exactly the same as Miss Ashley, so that's one of the things we're trying to replicate. All right, how many minutes did it take you to do this?
15.
Okay, so the next step is you want to true these up. Take them over to the sanding block. Just get them a little bit trued up. The nice Elliott Scott Miss Ashley plans. And so easy to build off. So nice. Well, this took you, you know how it took you 25 minutes to do both of them. Now, any that come out twisted we'll give to Ostello. He doesn't know the difference.
Yes. Okay.
He doesn't know a straight wing from a crooked one. But then we don't either. All right, take them over to the sanding. We're making belt cranks over here. Let's get the belt crank wires off.
That's all right.
Or you can take the block, take the long sanding block and just hold them down.
Yeah.
Hold it in the front with tape. Here's what you can do. Put tape like at 3 locations and then just carefully sand it. And then vacuum up the dust so Karen doesn't commit murder when she sees you.
Okay.
If you put the ribs all in real straight, you don't have a lot to take off there. And don't go side to side, go front to back. You know what I mean?
See?
Tape them down. Yeah, exactly. Tape it down first. That's a good tip. That's it. This way it holds it flat to the table too. And then you want to put them both back to make sure they're the same. You know, you don't have one thick and one thin. There you go. Now just when you do that, go front to back real slow.
Front to back.
Slow. Now if you want to know if you really have them in place, take an ink marker and just put a mark on top of each one. And when you see the mark sand away, you know what I mean? That'll tell you that you've got each one even, because otherwise when you get to one and it's missing, you have like a bow in it.
Right.
Or just look at it that way. Because that really is the best way, boy. That Miss Ashley tail just came out perfect. What do you think there?
Not bad at all.
Okay.
Not bad for a Russian.
Maybe we can get you a job somewhere. That's another good idea Mike has. Just run a straight edge down, look for any light spots. Now what you should do is, while it's taped to the table, glue the top sheet on.
Yep.
You know, while it's in place, glue the top sheet, because if you hold it in your hand, they'll have a bow in it. This way it's taped down, then you can pull the tape out through the back or through the front. Just glue that right on place. You could use some of that thick CA so it doesn't go off right away, you know, it'll give you a little working time.
Give me time. That's going to be good.
Okay. You got to get the leading edge. You do with the sanding block?
I'm going to now.
Okay, get the leading edge and trailing edge trued up. Make sure it's not too big or too small.
She's learning how to do it.
Get both edges there, and then we'll cut up. We got to weigh up some of the 3/8 and make up the leading edge pieces. What Mike's doing is going through our last balsa order, taking out all the sheets, and we found some that are literally twice as heavy as the original ones. Now for a piece like the leading edge on a stab, you really don't, you want the lightest piece you can get back by the tail. You're getting some real nice light ones out of there, huh?
Yeah.
This is the one thing you don't, see look, Mike's last plane, he didn't weigh the wood. It still came out okay. What do we figure your plane weighs, 67 or something?
64.
Probably 64. So if you did this, you could at least chop 5 ounces off the plane. But every piece you got to do this to. The stripper and stripped off a nice clean piece of 3/8 that had no bow in it. Okay, you got that tacked on. Once that dries, now you can get the same, you can trim this off and get a piece of 1/4 inch for the back. Okay, now you got both edges on. Now clip the extra off.
Right.
Then do the other one, and then they're ready to sand the edges to shape. Okay, now you can lay that, keep it flat on a table. You're going to notice one angle is a little more than the other. It doesn't matter because we're going to cut it back anyway at 45. And the one thing you don't want to do is go too far. Take the last little bit off with a sanding block, not with the plane. All the trailing edge rounded off. Okay, good. Now what you want to do is get a center line on both sides so you can start carving up the leading edge. You can do it with tape, you can do it with a ruler, or you can do what you're doing there, is fine. Just get a center line, make sure it's in the middle on both. And then what we're going to do is take some tape on this end. You know how to lay that tape out, right? You've done that. No, take the 1/8 inch tape. What I like to do here, take the tape, 1/4 inch tape, put it over here. Okay, then put the 1/8 inch tape behind it, and then take this piece off. That's good. Now you can put the green tape right behind that. That gives you the edge to work off. Use the green tape. It's easier to see anyway. And then now you've got an edge to work off when you carve that. Should have been a brain surgeon with those hands. Okay. Then when you take up the original piece, that gives you a real good reference point. So just take up the first piece. And now you got your edge. You work from the edge to the center line, use the plane. You've done this already, right? Flip it over, do the other side too. So now you just connect the two dots. Okay, may as well do all 4 of them at once. Costello wants his tail done by this afternoon, you know.
Get a little glue in here for me. Something's popping off here.
Okay. And what you want to do is put them, because both edges are the same, the advantage of doing this, you put all 4 edges together and you can see that they're exactly the same. You know what I mean?
Right.
When you have a taper in them, no, man, you never get 2 the same. Okay, so get all 4 of those on there and then just get ready to cut it up. So you can tell a guy really knows his stuff when you can get the swirly to come off in one shot. Now that I've said that today. Ah! You lucky dog. You lucky dog. It works good with the tape, huh? See what it looks like after you sanded it all down? Let's see that angle.
It's the best I can do under these
rough conditions,
under these conditions.
Let's see. Oh, I'm telling you, you know your stuff, kid.
Yeah.
Okay, you know the next thing you have to do is build the little boxes for the horns on the edge. Because then you can't cut the hinge pockets till you build those little boxes.
Correct.
Make them out of some light ply or balsa, whatever you're going to make them.
Okay.
Work off a center line. It's always the best. Biggest tip of all, and this is the one that always seems to elude people, is from the stab, the next step is to mount the horn. Once the horn is in place, you can make those little boxes or whatever you're going to make around the horn. But that sets the elevators in place. If you put the elevators, and then you try to make the horn fit the elevators, so the next step for Mikey is, and I'm not going to be here, I have to go out on a mission of mercy. We're going to see if he can handle this on his own.
Leave me alone.
I'm leaving him with Peeps. Peeps will abuse him. Get the horn mounted, solder up the bushings, make the little tin can things, mount it to the back of the tail, and then you can make the 2 little boxes. See, the last thing, the absolute last thing, when the whole tail is done, make the tips. A lot of times I'd make the tip and then I go to put it together and it was like that. These are lessons learned the hard way. All right, I'll see you when I get back. Okay. This better be done when I get back, by the way.
Okay, boss.
Now, believe me, the only reason we came out to the field today, we have a friend from Norway here, Ingolf Stevenson is here. And believe me, it is too cold to fly and way too windy, but we're each going to take a flight. We'll make him launch planes. I want to send him home with a video of his trip to America. Anyway, Ingolf is a 747 pilot. He brought us a bunch of photos of the championships of Norway. He's been to my house several times. He has an SV11 currently, a carbon gear, which he busted. I'm not going to talk about that. We'll let him explain it. Anyway, we'll each try to get at least one flight today, and it is freezing here. I'm surprised there's no ice on the pond. I feel like I'm in Norway. Anything you'd like to say to Paul Walker before you launch his plane? Notice many Americans fly backwards.
I've never seen it before.
You never seen a backward guy like this?
It's the first time I've seen it in my life.
We call him, actually his name is Ass Backward Jacobone. All right, Rich, show him. Show him how tough Americans are.
The maneuvers will probably look strange to me.
Yeah.
Actually, according to George, where do you? No, you have to go this way. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We got him.
I'm sending this video to Paul Walker. He's going to teach you.
According to George Walker.
George Walker? There's no such person.
George Aldrich.
He's been
flying the right way.
He's been in Norway too long. We're going home to build after this flight. I'm freezing. This is no fun. It can't be above freezing here, Rich.
No, it's
Oh, who invited me out here today? I could have been home with Mike building a tail. God, what a mistake. I'm not an Eskimo. Let's have a few verses of I'm not an Eskimo. He's going to whack his finger here. I'm not an Eskimo. I live in Norway.
a Viking.
You could be in a nice cabin of a 747, turn the heat up, order some of that Norwegian food and say he comes out to play with Jacobone today. What a mistake. Rich, I'm freezing. It's time for coffee. Time for bagels and coffee.
What? We need to
This is not fun. Put some juice in it. This is an old Norwegian trick. Putting lighter fluid in a motor when it's freezing cold. You gotta be kidding me. I'm going home for coffee. This is not fun. Adamusco made the right move not coming up here today. Boy, and Zambelli, they're gonna say, you guys are crazy up here. This is out of control. Plus, as if that isn't enough, we got herds of geese flying over here. What are we doing here today, Uncle Richard? Rich, I thought we were smarter than this. I guess not. Hey, all right. You better lifting it up. It's cold. He broke another prop. Oh, man. He does that all the time.
Probably got a wing under his tail.
Wow, what is this? Can only can feel the turbulence.
Set the record straight, Mr. Jackabone. Ingolf, be my witness. Didn't I tell him take off downwind?
Yeah, that's right.
No. And be my witness as God is my witness.
He got a wind under his tail.
He got a wind under it. This guy's an airline, a real airline pilot. And Richard says, nah, how can a guy flying a 747 know more than me? And it just cost him $52 or 20 or whatever these props are now. So do you like the way that four-stroke runs in the wind? Did that run nice? Yeah, I like the way that 72's been running. So far, so good. Oh, it's time to go to the shop. This is crazy. We're just bouncing around here like an old lady in a washing machine. I took 2 flights in this horrendous hurricane-y wind here. And basically, the thing I accomplished, I hope, I didn't even bother hooking up the Zetron, was just to see that this prop is pitched about where I want it. I think for our purposes it's going to be fine. And we're going to somewhere where it's warm and comfy. Woo! Back from...
That's the parking lot.
Back from the field. I wanted to show this because Rich chipped the prop, but here's the problem. There's a couple of safety issues involved here. When a carbon fiber prop cracks, and this side looks like it's cracked to here, I've seen a lot of guys try to fix them, and probably there are some people qualified to fix them, but I've also seen people, won't mention anybody, but he's in our club, he just put some CA on here and almost took the hat off his head when it let go. And he was showing other people how to do that. So the best thing I can say is we want to try to see what the total diameter is, because when the props are expensive, we know that. This is 11.5. We probably could make an 11 out of this, but then maybe a 10.5. You can use this on a 35 or a 40. Not your first choice, but it's then a spare prop. Now in our case, who else has a 40? Peabody has a 40.
Yeah.
Well, but the point is, if you're going to get it, Brian could use it. Or you can use it for a braking prop. When you start cutting into where this is already split, see how that's split? That split will continue going down there. It's like tearing a phone book. It wants to just keep going. So if you were going to be real crazy, I don't know that you could do this. These props are made out of EPON. If you're going to use, you can't use 5-minute glue, and I know what the problem is. Some people have done it and it hasn't broken. So then they go and tell other people, oh yeah, that's really a safety thing. Believe me, this tip of the prop is going somewhere, depending on the motor and the RPM, somewhere real close to the speed of sound. And when a little chunk of it lets go, it's like a bullet. And if your eye, especially the guy launching a plane or a kid standing around, so my thought and feeling is, this will now be an 11-inch prop, but I'd trim it down to where the split ends, and no bigger than that, and never add a little glue or anything out there thinking that that's going to save you a prop. That's really a safety issue. The only time I ever saw something like this exact thing happen, it happened to Bob Whiteley in 1988, and it basically cost him an overnight repair to his plane. As far as I can tell, and I could be wrong, not gonna say this is law, but these are the most dangerous things. These are made for fishing with 8 and 10 pound test line. I know companies sell them, but they are, as far as I remember, they're not approved by the AMA. Let me see one of those ones that is approved. They're called combat clips. Some of these aren't even made out of steel, they're made out of brass. You gotta look. But what I'd always suspect would be a problem. Now this happened to Ingolf, and I'm going to let him tell the story of what happened to his plane. This is rated, I think, for 40 pounds. I'm not sure. This isn't. This, in other words, when you go to bend this, you just go to bend it. You can feel this is the material itself is a lot stronger. This is butter. So what I'm suggesting is anybody that's flying a full-size, maybe anybody flying a plane period, that these would be the line clips of choice for me. Especially if you're a homeowner. Hey, tell me what happened, because this is really not funny stuff. When you lose a plane.
It's actually rather serious, because I don't know if I made a mistake, if the clip was locked or not. But what happened, I was flying the schedule, and
the schedule, by the way, is the pattern for people in America.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of these tapes get sold in America, you know.
Yeah, okay. And it must have happened somewhere in, just flying level, and the dome line went. So the plane started going into small loops, and eventually hit the ground, somewhat nosed down. So I broke the prop, and I broke my windy carbon gear.
Oh! I bet I know where we could buy another one of them. And they're only $90 today only. Normally 40, for you 90.
And actually that might have saved my SVL.
It definitely, you're not the first one it saved. There's another guy it saved too.
Absolutely.
Saved his plane from total destruction. So now this unadulterated comment.
Those carbon fiber gears are fantastic.
I've been making my living with those carbon gears. But it's true, they act like a little bit like an airbag. That's true.
Yeah.
But really, I think those line clips are for the birds. What do you think?
Probably equivalent, right size for this.
It's the right size if you have a pet bird instead of a stunt ship.
Look at Peeps.
Yeah, he loves that. But Ingolf said another thing, that he's an airline pilot. What do you fly, 747?
No, I was flying with 767.
767, even better.
Yeah.
You're one step ahead of Fancher. he's an amateur. He only flies 747. I fly an Air Cooper.
What I said was that Windy's philosophy is exactly what we're using in airline business as well.
Yeah.
If anybody is doing some things and experiencing mishaps or whatever, it's very important to tell about it so other people can learn from it.
Yeah. Now in private aviation they do AD notes. Is that the same thing they do in airlines?
Yeah, that's the same.
So it's like similar. If one person has a part fail in service, you put out an AD bulletin, AD note, whatever they call it, and then it goes to everybody that would be flying that airplane.
That's right.
That's
to prevent it from happening from other people.
Yeah. But believe me, a lot of people years ago, I swear, they used to have a problem, and they'd go out and tell, oh, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. But only tell everybody. At least you get something out of your broken prop and whatever happens, the accident.
That's right.
Ingolf he's got some photos from his home country in Norway. Tell us who these people are.
Yeah.
And who's like a good flyer and who's like a windy.
This picture shows Cowl who is in the Norwegian Championship. I don't know how many times. Must be something like 10 to 15 times or so. And
He's the best flyer?
he's the best flyer in Norway, definitely.
Okay.
He's hard to beat. And the two planes he's showing off here is this red SV11,
Okay.
and the other one is a replica of a around 1960 Finnish plane.
Okay.
Special. And he had one from 65, which he lost. It was a fun of that
Not
plane.
with line clips, did he?
No, he had an engine which cut on top of the wing over.
Oh, God.
But it was a fun on that plane, so we built a new one.
Yeah,
It got
yeah.
a Stoker 46, I think, in it.
Okay.
And the other one, the SV11, got an Retro Discovery 60.
That's a Discovery?
Yeah.
This looks like a real nice Thunderbird. Who does that belong to?
That's Thunderbird, that's right. An OS 40 FP in it. And it's a Norwegian flyer as well.
Okay. Another one.
Here comes up.
Let me get the phone. Is that our phone?
This is,
Hello? You got him. I'm with Ronnie at the hobby shop. Okay.
yeah, this is a Norwegian design, actually, Angel.
Okay.
And I think it got a Super Tiger 51 in it.
Okay. That seems to be a popular engine in Norway,
Yeah,
huh?
it is.
Basically, it's a good running, cheap, relatively inexpensive
That's right.
engine.
It is. And this is an old pilot,
Don't say old around me.
pilot Prince
Okay.
in a very old Enya 35.
Okay. There's a nice one.
Yeah, this is a
That's got
looks
this-
like an old plane, but it's
Tissue
rather
finish.
new actually. It's just built up to look like an older one.
Yeah. I see a lot of combat pictures.
Yeah, there's a few.
These look like a Larry Scarinzi thing. What's the?
There's
I
a
mean-
Warlord. There's an English design,
Okay.
a flight streak, and a Modern Combat behind there. Now this is an American Twister. I can't remember which engine it's got actually.
It looks like it's powered by a rag.
And this is how he called back. Here's number 3. And this is his own planes, own designs.
Okay.
Looking like old.
I like the clear finishes. That's
Yeah.
nice.
And this is the Angel, which you saw earlier.
Oh, he's got two of them.
He got
Yeah, he's
two of
got
them,
two of
yeah. It's Petterhausen, which is number 2 in the Northern Championships.
Now this is a funny picture. I'm going to let him do the caption. You do the caption. Here's the caption. He was at Paul Walker's house last week, and he told Paul Walker, "There's a guy flying, right? Find the plane. You point out the plane." Let the people look at it for 20 minutes. They still can't find it. I can't find it. So what Paul Walker have to say? He thinks you're a cool guy, or he wanted free airline tickets, or what?
He found the plane anyway. So.
Okay, and what is he had a Sato 56?
He
That's
was
cool.
running a Sato 56.
Cool.
Tried to
I hope he's going to join us on the Zambelli thing. I got to email him. See if he'll find something out. He knows his stuff with motors. Okay.
Now this is early 60 or late 58, 50. I think it's Finnish design, Trump special.
Okay, here's a picture of
this
the
is the
tail,
same-
the tail
same
thing. Well,
thing.
no, I love these clear finishes.
Yeah,
That's such
yeah.
a nice nostalgic thing.
It belongs to Clemmer Melson. It's a very good builder as well. Built very,
Looks
very
real nice.
plane. Oh, that's the same plane. That's a Trump special.
Okay, this looks unusual.
Radio
What
Stalker.
is, which is this one?
This is
That's got a nice thick
Klaus
wing.
Mikey's, I think the name is Old Tiger,
Really?
running with a KMB 40 engine.
Okay. And this looks like the guy who you said is the top flyer.
Yeah, that's right. With his.
And he's got a stalker in it. What did you say?
No, he got a
retro. Oh, that's
retro
what.
Discovery.
That's a
60.
nice quiet engine. Another picture of it?
SV11.
Yeah.
A Randy Smith kit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's nice.
Yeah, that is.
Clear finishes seem to be in vogue there with you
Yeah,
guys.
some of these old good builders like to have these. This is how they call banks. I can't remember this. I think that is a Super Tiger 45, an old engine, or maybe a 40. I can't remember actually.
Now this is your plane showing the take-apart features. One of the things a lot of people like to see on a video. James Mills has just called me and he wants to see how do you make a take-apart plane. I ought to send him your pictures.
This is the tapeout of my SV11.
This is how the tailpiece comes across?
Yeah, and there's just one wooden pin coming in here.
Okay.
And then it locks this way in with a aluminum tongue coming in here.
Okay.
With a vertical screw from the
Okay, the screw goes in, mine goes in from the back.
And it holds the tail wheel at the same time, so it's just one screw keeping everything in place. And the other, this is the wing saddle, which I just reinforced with some thin plywood and carbon fiber.
Okay, this is something I didn't do on Miss Ashley, but I probably will do on future planes.
The wing is held on with 2 screws at the front, 2 in the back.
Yeah.
And the 2 screws up front.
This is how the guys in England do it, with the screws going in.
And that's holding the landing gear as well at the same time.
So there's 4 screws holds everything.
Yeah.
No screws up here?
No.
See, I added a screw up there. I guess I'm a worry wart or something. Anyway, there's your whole plane.
Yeah.
The whole thing in one piece.
Yeah.
Now this shows the, believe it or not, a lot of people want to know about the take-apart construction. There's a lot of reasons. You guys do it because you want to carry the plane in a Volvo or something. Yeah. We do it because I want to replace the wing or fuselage someday.
I can see the 2 screws there holding the stabilizer.
Yep. 2 is enough, huh?
Yeah.
I put 3 in mine, showing you what a coward I really am.
3mm screws, that's more or less 1/8 of an inch, or a little bit bigger than a 440 screw.
Now another thing that I didn't realize, the bolts hold the gear too.
Yeah, that's right.
Those shock absorbing windy carbon fiber gear that save your plane every time you crash. Or you use crazy line clips or something.
And here it is.
In all its beauty.
All put together. Or you try to do maneuvers after you don't have...
oh yeah, we've all done that. Thanks to Gene Martin.
After you run out of fuel.
Who's this good looking guy starting the engine?
That's me.
What an ego. All these airline pilots are exactly the same. Oh, man.
It's the first flight of the plane, actually.
Okay, first flight?
Yeah, it was the first flight.
Now, tell me about this, because I thought this was a great idea. Now, what he did, believe it or not, this is the kind of ideas you can get from the video. First, another picture, I guess he's taken off. But look at the line and tell me if you think the plane's out of trim.
Turn it around.
Okay, turn it that way.
There we can
Can you tell the plane is out? You can hold a ruler on the lines. Wow, that's really crooked. You should call Randy and get your money back on that wing. Look, the thing is out of guard by 40 degrees. Oh, man.
So I had to trim the outer wing down.
Okay,
It's quite obvious from those photos.
Yeah, the photo's real. Now, you could also take a picture after you trim it.
Yeah, sure.
And then do it inverted and then just run a straight ruler. That'd be one good way to do it. Anyway, we're having a lot of fun here today. Well, talk about a no-flying day, though. Okay.
From the Norwegian Championships as well.
Okay.
Line up for some of the planes.
Now, this is one where it's in trim or it's out of trim? Oh, this is you doing the vertical.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's a good picture. See if you can find the airplane.
I don't think there was any
even President Nixon can't find a plane in there. In fact, here's our good friend Joan McIntyre, who she judged at your championship.
Yes.
She spent a week with me, and boy, we have fun climbing the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
She made me huff and puff.
She spent 10 days in Norway, so she was judging the Norwegian Championship.
Another judge.
So.
I noticed. You see what happens in Norway if you judge? And they don't like your score. Let me show you what happens. They just come by and slap you, and you fall into the river. So the Norwegians have their own personal, the Viking way. Anyway, picture of all the models that competed.
Yeah, all the models that competed.
That's a nice picture. You don't give me a couple of these for Stunt News. You got any dupes? No. Write up a little thing while you're here.
Actually, all these pictures are duplicates.
No, you need a couple for Tom. You know, you got to give him 2 or 3. We'll go through them later.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me who this is. Somebody. Is this Death Row in Norway or what?
This is actually after the combat.
Oh, these are combat flyers.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
You're clumsy for an Ella. You ever crash when you're trying to land?
It's on left.
Okay. This is Klammer?
This is Klammer, yes.
Okay.
And number 2 is Jan Woll.
Okay.
And number 3 is Peter Hassen.
Okay.
Right a few.
Now, I heard that like in Norway, they don't execute people by putting a noose around their neck. But this looks like maybe that's not true. Now, this is the best one. This is we will mention his name. Ingolf getting his award here. How did that work out, guy? Look out! Look, she's on a tippy. Look at this. We got to show this up close. Look at this. She's on her tippy toes. This guy's like 9 feet tall. He can't fly on 70-foot lines. You know, they have to make a special handle for him and stuff. Anyway, we appreciate the pictures, and don't use those cheesy line clips. That's the bottom line here, guys. Okay, and today I got from Ron, the hobby shop that you saw, we visited on the last video. He's been getting us parts. I'm going to send this out to Warren Walker. What I'm going to hope he'll be able to do is put a 90-degree bend in this so that this can fit closer to the fuselage. The objective is to get it 90 degrees. These, of course, are fine metric threads, very difficult to... I don't want to booger up the threads in any way. And possibly one of the things Warren might do is cut these ends off and put a new piece in here that already is pre-bent. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. But you've seen his metalworking shop. You know he's a master. Now you can see the nice little baffle that's in there. There's only one other problem. These leak around the perimeter. So what I'm hoping Warren can do, well, he's got the welder out, is weld around this seam. And the last thing we want to put on, now we know we can't use the rubber. The rubber is totally last 10 flights and it melts. When it doesn't melt, it restricts the engine. So what I'm going to try to have Warren do, and I drew him up some drawings, is take about a 22-degree angle off here, a 22 here, so we have a smooth 45-degree bend. It doesn't matter if it's 48 or 50 or if it was even a little more. But it doesn't need to be 90. It'll be too restrictive. I'm guessing about 45. I'll trim this off to meet the end of the fuselage. But what I'm going to do is we're going to try, and Warren, of course, aside from making the world's best pickles, has volunteered to help us with this, so hoping we're going to put you right to work, Warren. I'll send Warren out my little hand drawing here. I also thought of another way we could, if he wanted to use the original part, is do some pie slices and then using his welder to weld that up. Just some of the thoughts. In the worst of all worlds, he could cut an oversized tube, certainly not undersized, just oversized, and then weld the ends in. When you're an expert welder, that's obviously no problem. But one thing you don't ever want to do, and from motorcycle technology, you don't ever want to just cut a 90-degree on one side and 45 on the other. You want to do it by doing a 22.5 on each side. We know the final part will look something like this, but then there's a last choice. If Warren has a tubing bender, you could weld this piece right up here and put a very smooth bend, which would be a much better choice, of course, but we don't have all the choices, and most of all to weld that back piece up. So what we're looking for is kind of a custom exhaust system made with stock Sato parts, but the most important thing is to get the 90-degree angle. Once we have the 90-degree angle, I think the rest will be kind of easy. Now this came from Paul Gittel, and I also got an email from Jim Plaskin today. Jim Plaskin has offered to loan us a Typhoon book that he has, and guess what I see? He said, would you like to borrow it? Don't even ask, just send it. We'll take care of you. Anyway, a nice postcard. We're starting to really get the final inspiration we need to put the push on for this project. This is going to be a monumental project, and I can't wait. We're going to be, actually, I think we're going to start early next week. Yeah, I just wrote a real short piece that's going to be in Stunt News soon. And I thought I would run this by everybody because we're basically today going to start making parts for the Typhoon project. But one of the things that I've grown to appreciate over the years is how to use time effectively. My own personal way of dealing with this is I call it time management. It seems like an oversimplification, but there's over 4 or 5 things that I see people do constantly that sabotages their ability to either build the planes they want or become world-class flyers or both. And the biggest one is, and I always use this as my own I think there's a Navy saying that says, you know, you should never stand up when you can sit down, never sit down when you can lay down, never stay awake when you can sleep. There's something like that. I'm obviously I've never been in the Navy. Never been in. Banjock was in the Navy, and he might have been the one that told me this, but I'm not sure. Anyway, here's my point, and it's such a valid point. It's a point that slips by a lot of people. A lot of people just think they're just going to pour more and more time or energy or money into an event and get better or have more satisfaction from it, when it's not really true. What really does constitute a gain is when you can use time effectively. Now, this may seem ridiculous. It may seem like something, well, what are you telling me this for? I'm wasting time watching a video and you're telling me something I already know. I have seen more people, and our club just happens to be littered with them. Usually at our club field, the air is good in the morning and terrible in the afternoon. And so what I see a lot of people do that really should be practicing or should be doing other things is they show up at the field in the afternoon at 1 o'clock. By then the air is already shot. They don't get much done. So what I've targeted is, and I guess you've seen over the last couple of years, people that have been on board with the videos, is I try to do almost all of my practicing as early as I can in the morning. The reason for that is the air is usually a little more stable, at least in our part of the country. And in the afternoon, I can go about, I've set up my business hours so that I'm usually in the shop in the afternoon. In the afternoon, the air is not good. Now, a lot of people, I used to volunteer when I worked for Ford Motor Company to work the night shift so that I had all day to bounce back and forth between these two things. But in its oversimplified version, fly when flyable. Again, it seems almost ridiculous to even say it, but a lot of people, and a good example is, and I've put it on a video for many different people, and the latest one of them is Mike Kajeski. Now, Mike Kajeski, like myself, has a very complex, time-consuming way of earning a living. Being a contractor, when the weather is appropriate, he has to be on the roof or doing aluminum siding or building stooges. He has to manage time effectively, and so do I. I not only have to manage the real estate that I own, run the businesses that I own, make videos, build planes, improve my flying skills, and develop new products. The possibility is, the possible solution to that is, I need to build when possible. Now, in my case, the thing that's possible is, I have gaps, and almost everybody I know does. They have gaps during a day. I'm just making up pretend things, just to make a pretend, because this slips by so many people. They have an obligation in the morning. Let's say they have to mow the grass. Something they have to do in the afternoon, maybe they have to go shopping. Then maybe something else later on in the day, they want to wash the car. But what always happens, it happens to me, is there are always gaps in between. Now in my case, there's always a gap in the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And what I always do is when building season comes, which is today we're going to start, is in the morning. I mean, we have a certain hour that the family gets up in the morning and we have our breakfast, but I get up, I try to get up 1 hour early. I feel if I can get up an hour early, in that hour of time I can get a lot more done because there's no interruptions. I don't have a phone call. And then something I have to do, let's go make some bell cranks, we're out of bell cranks, up carbon fiber gear are out. See, this hour in the morning, and usually it's the hour at night. Now a lot of times Karen will go to sleep, or she goes to classes a lot of times, and I'll have even 2 or 3 hours at the end of the day. And what these are, the phone doesn't ring, generally nobody comes over. What I have here, and I've managed to convince a lot of people this is a good thing to do if you're really dedicated. Obviously, if it's a hobby to you and you're just doing it for fun, well, this is not appropriate. But if you can figure out your life that you can get things done in these gaps, and I always have, this is the way my day works out. A typical day would be, and I'm not looking for sympathy from anybody, but I don't have a 9-to-5 job where when I get home, boom, the rest of the day is toy airplanes. What happens is I have obligations to make deliveries, obligations to make products, obligations to answer the phone. But in between I try to get these gaps. I call them gaps. And no matter what they are, these gaps all during the day, they all add up. And on a day like today, I'll try to take the gaps that are an hour here, a half hour here, 20 minutes here. Now, a lot of people don't do this. And at the end of, say, 6 months, they're still putting a wing in the body of a plane when the other guy is buffing it out. So this whole time management thing, if a person were to work 9 to 5, it would be very easy. But when you work odd hours, different hours, and especially, it's not really as important in flying time because there's always ways you can juggle that around. But in building time, I find it really important to try to, every time I can get a gap of an hour, a half hour, an hour, a half hour. At the end of the day, sometimes I've done more than a guy has done if he had all day Saturday with nothing to do. Now I've just made a rough, and I mean this is the roughest idea. When I approach the building season of the year, I have to make a decision which of these is going to be appropriate. And these are just rough estimates of what it would take me. In the past, when I've built a kit, I always assume a kit takes about 100 hours, roughly 100 hours, so I need to barter that time carefully. I'm trying to barter my time this year away because when the Strega kit, the Brodak Strega kit comes out, and that should be soon, we don't have an exact date from John yet, I'm going to want to build one. But in the meantime, I want to get ahead on my Typhoon. Building from plans, these are just rough numbers. They would vary with everybody, but to keep in mind which of these projects, it's like going to buy a car. Are you going to buy an Escort? Are you going to buy a Taurus, a Windstar? And at some part of this, you got to realize what's appropriate, how much time do you have to spend, how much effort are you willing to spend, and what do you expect from the final product. Now this year is one of the years that we're going to be doing a relatively new design. And I say relative because we're going to be using a lot of the technology from the past few years. But you can see what's happened is it just becomes every time you go to the next level, this is what happens is the hours it takes to do it increase. And for instance, if you're building a Strega kit right from the kit, you're probably doing about 1/5 to 1/6 of the development of building a plane with new features, new technology, like we're trying to incorporate the throttle system, trying to incorporate the possibility in the future of using a lot of carbon fiber parts like the wing and flaps. But you can always, the amount of time you need, if you only need 100 hours, it's easy to fit that into your life. When you need more and more time, you need to put bigger and bigger and more chunks of time into it to make it happen. Now, whenever I even think about a design that's semi-scale, in other words, if the plane is supposed to, at the end of its construction, represent or look like a Spitfire, a Mustang, like Dan Banjock's Mustang, Paul Walker's B-17, a P-47, look what happens, and I know this happens, it happens to me anyway, even if it doesn't have any, the time required gets astronomical. So once you decide you're going to build a plane, and now in the middle of it, you want to decide, oh, I want it to be a Mustang instead of a Cardinal. Whoops, you've just entered the next level of time commitment, especially if you're going to do a semi-scale, very detailed paint job. And as you get even to the level after that is, when you're going to be doing something, and we're going to be trying to make a plane with a carbon fiber fuselage as the ultimate part. We had such good luck with Miss Ashley. I really want to build on that technology and try to take that to the next level. But again, once you go to new technology, if you're not going to use all standard balsa construction, this number just goes up, and it goes up very quickly. And as the final thing, and I can't think of a project that would be more complex than doing a project that's used combining new technology, semi-scale, and a relatively, not totally, but relatively new design. And I've just left this as being an unknown, but if there is such a thing as a more time-consuming project, I haven't been able to find it yet. And this is what we're going to be trying to do with the Typhoon. The way we're going to do it is very simple. We've already done this part of it. We've already spent the whole second half of this year flying every single opportunity we possibly could. Developing the throttle system, the Z-Tron. You've seen all that on video. We've needed to narrow down our engine choices, our throttling choices, and we've been able to do it with a simple philosophy. We fly when it's flyable. We fly almost always in the morning when the air is usable, and in the afternoon we basically do non-flying things. In our part of the country, possibly everywhere, this way you wind up burning more gallons of fuel. And there's very few mornings I can go to the field that I don't at least burn 3/4 a half a gallon of fuel if I'm by myself, and a full gallon if I have test pilots. What we're going to do here is we're going to be starting early next week. We're going to be getting up early in the morning, getting our hour in, getting gaps in the day in, and possibly, and we always do during the building and finishing season, is staying up late, staying up that extra 2 or 3 hours as many nights of the week as we possibly can. The reason is we need to, and it's easy to figure this out, we need to take the life that we have, the time that we have, and we're probably talking about, by the time this season is over, of condensing maybe 500 or 600 hours of development time and building time down into a very, very new concept of a model that I don't even have a mind's eye view of yet, but I want to try to use every trick in the book. But I also, at the same time, I realize there's people that follow along with me that this is not appropriate for, that this is just, they don't have 600 hours in their life, or they have it and they don't want to spend it. So I'd make this suggestion: consider a kit as the easiest way to build a quick competitive plane. Building from plans, and we also have Miss Ashley plans, Cardinal, I have about 30 designs on plans. If you're going to do a new design, you got to remember it's that extra time. In an example of a kit, you can pop the ribs right out of the package. In the case of plans, you have to cut the ribs. In the case of a new design, you have to design the ribs. If you're going to make the ribs out of a different material, you've got to invent the way of doing it. So keep in mind, this is a real important concept, because a lot of people that come to the shop, they look at, for instance, at Miss Ashley, and they say, I'll buy a Cardinal kit and I'll make a Miss Ashley. Well, it's not really the same thing. There's levels of things that you want to achieve, and before we actually cut a piece of wood or mix some epoxy for our Typhoon, we want to target exactly what I'm trying to accomplish here and exactly what the vision in my mind of this plane is. So just to get a little brief feeling for what we're trying to do, some of the things we learned in the year 2000. A carbon fuselage. Now, in the past year, what we did with Smith Ashley is we made 2 fuselages because we really weren't sure it would work. We made a wood one and a carbon one. Now see, we're building on last year's technology, and in this case, the winner by far. It was lighter, perfectly strong in every way. So this year, what we're going to do is, to save time, again, we're talking about time management, we're not even going to make a wood fuselage. Now that's a pretty gutsy move, because most people would want to have that to fall back on if the carbon didn't work, but we're kind of confident from what we learned last year. What we learned last year is we could do this. It was doable. Last year we spent almost a whole week coming up with, from drawings that Joe Adamusco had made, from Cardinal kits, we came up with what our Miss Ashley airfoil is, and we were real happy with that airfoil. It's a semi-al rabe, almost totally curved airfoil. So what we're going to do this year as a time saver, remember this is a time saver, is we're going to use, in the wing itself, we're going to use exactly the same rib templates. We're going to use exactly the same ribs, probably the same jig even, but what we're going to do is reorient them to have the rounded tips and the rounded flaps that a Typhoon would have. But what we're going to keep is the significant part of the wing that does all the work will be relatively the same. Now, what I'm hoping is going to happen, because we're in an ongoing development with the carbon fiber wing, is somewhere down the road, of course I'd want to make prototypes and test them out at the field and have other people test them, but this may evolve, I'm almost sure it's going to evolve within the next few months into our carbon wing. But if it doesn't, we'll have the wood one. Now, see, in this case, we're being a little bit cautious. We're not eliminating the wood wing. What we're going to do is build a wood wing first, continue the development of our carbon wing, and if it comes to be that after we make 3 or 4 of them, and people have tested them, what we'll do, because we have the mold made with the same airfoil, relatively speaking, what will happen is we'll wind up with a plane. Last year we had a plane with 2 fuselages. This year we'll have a plane with 2 wings. But the first part of this, we're going to do a traditional wing. Traditional in every way. We know we can make those wings in silver under 14 ounces with all the hardware, flaps, tips. Only this year there'll be one extra feature. We'll have the ability in the tip to put our battery for the Zetron and our receiver in this tip, and tubes, balsa tubes, or some way of snaking wiring through the wing, so that we have an optional, and we don't need to use it, but we'd like to have it, the throttle control. And this was the hard part. I spent probably 200 hours, about 25 gallons of fuel, and a lot of experimenting to decide on which powertrain I wanted to have in this plane, because we're committing 500 to 600 hours of time to this project. And clearly, in my book, clearly the winner in this case was the Sato 72. Now the only problem with this is, and we do have a problem, is even though we've ordered the laser from England and Elliot has expedited that, we don't have it in-house yet to test. So I'm going to go with the winner of this fly-off, hey, I'll fly you off. Get away from me. Look at this little guy. Anyway, we needed to go through this in a methodical, unbiased way, come up with what we thought was the best motor, which I think is this, at least at this point in time, the Sato 72 fits the needs that we have. I also, in terms of this, I needed to know the setup. And we've experimented with tanks, props. This is all on the 4-cycle development video. And it isn't, see, a lot of people think, oh, you just go down a field, you put on, oh, that works good. No, I like, even when you find one that works good, take it off, put something else on, and see how much better it is. And you can see how many times we've changed these things. These things are endless. Fuel. Now, just as an example, the things we've learned so far that are virtually things that you'd never learn had we never done this test program and we just went out and used what we had last year. Okay? Now, the tank, the shim was critical. No matter which engine I used, and I've done, I guess, 6 or 7 of them so far, the shim on the tank, the middle of that tank has to be right in the middle of the carburetor, and I haven't found any way of changing that. With Venturis that we've tried, any other way. The tank, and in this case of the Sato, it's 5/8 of an inch off the mounts. The props, the clear winner is a 14.5 rev up. And I've had many 3 blades, 2 blades, and I always come back when push comes to shove, the 14.5 rev up is the proper choice, cut down or full size. The fuel, we went back with 4-cycle fuel, the YS fuel, every kind of nitro on the planet, and we wound up using, as our choice, 5% GMA Power Master. But even at this point, you would think, oh, well, that's... No. When we build a plane for the powertrain, what we want to do is we want to make the crutch wide enough that any of these engines in the future could fit in, and also not eliminate the possibility of using two-cycle engines. I don't want to limit myself in any way, because the fuselage will be wide enough that we possibly, even if we decided to use two cycles with carburetors, two cycles without carburetors, I want to leave as many options as possible. I want every option I possibly can have. It's really taken time for us to even develop. We went through several possibilities. First, there's one possibility, is we're just going to run the plane without the throttle, the normal way. But from that possibility, the three choices we have, the Z-Tron, we have Fred Crone, come on, this bird, get out of here. We have Fred Cronwet system, which with the heavy lines becomes maybe not appropriate. We have not really done a full test on that yet. And Dave Cook's system, the 27 megahertz system, which we don't have yet. But the good news is, because we've put our nose to the grindstone, we've already got one system out of the three done, tested, in the bank, and we can use this in the plane. And we know that system, if we do the wing with the tip weight here, it's going to add less than an ounce. That's about what 1 or 2 coats of clear add to a plane. So looking at the whole package, and I hope this isn't boring anybody, because to me this is the most exciting part of any modeling project, is looking at all the options that you possibly have and choosing the best ones. And the options always are, and they start real easy. They start with, how are you going to go about building it? How much time do you think you want to allocate? And then up into the upper echelon, where in my case I not only want to wind up with a new plane, but with new technology, possibly, even possibly. Now, I can't use this in F2B. I've been told there's some kind of a crazy rule that's written in French that nobody can interpret yet. But I haven't gotten a written thing that I can't use it either. I just have hearsay so far. And until I have it in writing, or somebody tells me, see, this is the good thing. You could go to a contest and they say, oh, you can't use your Z-Tron today. The plane doesn't change. Nothing changes. It doesn't even pay to take the servo out of the plane, because it only weighs 4.5 grams. So anyway, this is our planned project, and we're going to try to do it with extreme, in our case, because my mother has really been going through a rough time health-wise. It's going to mean that my time management is even more critical than it's been in the past. And keep in mind the thing that we originally started with. We all own this thing called time. And when you're, like when you're 18 years old, time is, la-da-da-da-da, I'm going to see my girlfriend, I'm going to go ride around on my car, when you're young. Then when you're like 30 or 40 or whatever, you kind of start to think, that time is getting to be a problem. Then you have kids, you put the kids through college, and you do something else. But eventually you get to be old windy. Now, I'm 55, and for me this time is like nothing. I mean, in between my obligations of doing things to earn a living and keep this house in relatively nice shape, and one of the things I never trade away is the time I spend with my family. I have a certain dedicated time that I spend with them, and no matter what, I don't compromise that time. That time is not. So what I do is I try to take advantage of this very little time that I have left. And as you get older and older, not only does it get smaller and smaller by the day, but there's less and less days you have left. And eventually, what happens to all of us is we all run out of time. We never run out of money. You never run out of salami. You never run out of models. You always, in the end, run out of time. And that's why it's so precious and so worth making a plan, a good plan for. Now, step one. Today I have about an hour. It's early in the morning, and I have about an hour to spend. So what I'm trying to do is look for little projects I can do. In essence, I'm looking for small, little pieces of pieces of construction I can do. One of the things I can do today is make the motor mount crutch. Now, to explain where this is going, a normal fuselage crutch has 3/8 by 1/2 inch mounts or maybe 1/2 inch square mounts, but the mounts are placed, and that pretty much determines the width of the fuselage. Well, we're doing something a lot more scale. We're using 5/8 by 3/4 mounts, and we're not going to make the crutch that actually will hold the engine. What we're doing is we're going to make a plug. The plug is going to be exactly like the finished fuselage will be. In fact, when we're all done, somebody can sand off all the primer and probably use it for a legitimate plug. They can go build an airplane from it, but we're not going to do that. We're going to save it as a plug. But the first thing we're going to do is be using much bigger than standard motor mounts. And since we're not going to use these, this is what we normally would use. You can see the difference in height and the difference in width. But what we're going to do is we're going to put these in sideways, with the long side, so it makes for the widest possible fuselage. And again, we're building a crutch that really could be used as a motor mount crutch, but in essence what's going to happen is this is going to be a plug. The plug is going to be finished. We're going to build a complete fuselage and finish it and use it as if the objective was that it's just going to be a plug very similar but not exactly like Miss Ashley was. Now also, the other thing, most normal planes, normal size width planes, use 1 3/4 or 2 inch spinners. I don't know what width we're going to wind up with, either 2 1/4 or 2 1/2, but it's going to be a larger than normal spinner. Now one of the benefits and the reasons for doing this is the big 4-cycle engines will fit right, and this, we don't have our Sato yet. Ken Clapson is getting us a Sato from Canada. And I've been told it's going to be 4 weeks, but what's going to happen in the meantime is I have Paul Winter's 72 here, and I have his 56, so I can use his motor to make the crutch. And we'll thank him ahead of time. Paul, I'm going to run a Dremel tool in that engine and get chips in the carburetor and everything. No, seriously. But then we're going to wind up with one of the key features of the Typhoon being that large scoop, possibly that even to the point of putting a little semi-scale radiator inside. If you look at how a real Typhoon is, it's one of the features, because we don't have to get in and choke the engine unless we convert to a 2-cycle engine. And certainly having this wider, more scale-like fuselage, we did the same thing when we went from the Spitfire to the Seafire. It makes for, even just widening it 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to go, I think, 3/8 altogether, it makes for a much more scale-like plane. And then once you add on the scale exhausts, I mean, you can see where a project like this, it just turns into more and more time to make all these little parts, molds, whatever. But one of the things we're going to do is we're going to try to use as many parts from previous planes, like the rib shapes from Miss Ashley, because we've already developed that, and we can save 2 or 3 days of not having to redraw that whole thing up. Now, some of the reasons we chose the Typhoon, first of all, we like the way it looks. Really like the way it looks, in fact. Because we wanted to have a plane with a relatively large nose to bury that 4-cycle 72 in. We wanted to have a big scoop so that whole engine could be contained. You also, because the engine is an ounce or two heavier than say a typical 60 setup, what I'd like to have is just the fact that the nose is physically shorter. In this case, we're going to make the nose, I did a calculation on my own and then ran it by Noel Drindak, and he gave me a 3-page dissertation on figuring out the moment arms of things, and we've come to the conclusion the nose moment arm needs to be 8 inches. Now, the other reason I like this design, it has long gear and big wheels for taxiing. That's one of the features. If we have a throttle, it's going to be pretty useless if you can't land the plane. The other thing I like about it, there's a wide choice of paint jobs. There's 40 or 50 different camo schemes, desert camo. There's one that even is a prototype that has a yellow bottom. There's several to choose from. We haven't seen them all yet, but there's plenty of choices, and of course we're going to be doing an all Brodak dope finish. Now we're going to use the wing very similar to a Miss Ashley wing. But it's a proven part. We're not reinventing anything. And I know the airfoil that we chose for that wing worked out extremely well. But it doesn't mean that at some future time we won't be able to make that wing out of carbon, because we already have a mold for it. And it might be that even in the year to come, we'll have the time, the energy, and the expertise to make a carbon wing. But right now, we can start the project off, and it'll only take a few days to make a wood wing. The way we make the wood wings, if you make it that way, it's just a few days to frame it right out. We've also thought, and we have the technology already, but we want to have a comparison part. In other words, I want to use Nomex flaps, Nomex elevators and stuff. But I want to have the original parts, follow through with this, I want to have these parts made in wood. And then when I make the equivalent part in an experimental way, I can compare. And I'm not comparing, just guessing. I know if I make that an elevator and it's made out of balsa wood and it weighs 30 grams and the carbon one weighs 35, then I can, in essence, by having two tails, any possibility that the plane is nose heavy, even if the carbon tail were heavier, see, instead of making two fuselages now, I'm going to the next part. That would be an experimental part, the wings and tails, and ultimately possibly even coming up with two of each, that I could do a final balance of the plane just by going from carbon to wood with the flaps and the elevators, or by moving it around, vary to CG to vertical CG. But the point is, though, all the parts will interchange. The advantage of doing that is, and here's the case, here's the wood fuselage from Miss Ashley, and we have the extra pan actually bolted right on there. But what we can do with this, we have, this was not time wasted. If I wanted to, I could make another wing and tail. In fact, one of the thoughts that had occurred to me right away is when we do the carbon wing, the actual layup, I'd like to make a Miss Ashley carbon wing and just go fly it. But I don't want to take Miss Ashley apart and strip it all down. I can just, for almost the same amount of time, just make another wing and tail. Again, these are the things that I'm trying to build on, choices. We have the little canopy that comes apart. We can take the pilot, take the instruments out of that, put it in another fuselage. Or in this case, it's a bubble fuselage. We can come up with something even better. We're probably going to wind up somewhere in this thing with a lot of cockpit detail. When I first made this, the take-apart features, I thought, yeah, it's a lot of extra work. And I tried to go back and forth many times and evaluate how much extra time it took to make a plane and a fuselage. But what I learned from it, significantly, is now I'm way ahead of the game. Because let's say, for instance, if right now I wanted to, and I didn't want to campaign a Typhoon next year, I could take this plane and just make another tail, make another wing, make a carbon wing, make a built-up tail, I could have any combination of things that might result in having a model that would be, I'd have choices. Does it fly better with the bigger tail, smaller tail, like Dave Fitzgerald did at one time? Make several tails for the same plane. Anyway, what we have, as opposed to a plane that's built in one piece, it's difficult. Even this plane here, it would be difficult even just to replace the flaps. These take-apart planes, you can just pull them apart with an Allen wrench and a pair of needle nose pliers. And that's a significant advantage. To me, that's worth the little bit of extra time it takes to do it. And to me, it's that thing of building on everything we learned last year, making it just a little bit better, or doing it just a little quicker, or making it a little bit lighter, or stronger, or both, or all of the above, and using the time real efficiently so we get the most out of what's left of the time we have. Well, I might have mentioned this, not sure if I did. I spoke to Al Rabe several times in the last couple of weeks. We've been exchanging videos and parts and books and magazines and stuff. And he, at one time, did actual drawings, rough drawings for a Typhoon, which I want to have in my arsenal here to look at, to kind of scale from. And I've not eliminated the possibility that at some future time, and it's not going to be this year, but maybe next year or the year after, we're going to try to, and it might be a fun project to do even with Al Rabe on board, that we could work on it together would be, it's just a random thought, to do something that really is an Al Rabe. My planes are not really Al Rabe semi-scale. They're more designed so average people could build them very quickly. But certainly, combining our talents and our efforts, it might be that someday we could come up with something like this, and Gerald Champ has already given us what would amount to be the plug for a Mustang fuselage. And now with the bigger 4-cycle engines available, I keep looking at that plug, or what could be a plug, and thinking that might just be exactly what the doctor ordered. And it may be that a year from now, see, I always like to have this vision of what the future is going to be. It may be a year from now we have a mold for carbon fiber wings with dihedral. There's so many new things coming in this hobby. And if you don't explore them, and if you don't talk about them, then I don't think the vision is complete. I don't think you can really see that future as it is. And just think of the Sea Fury with a big 4-stroke, a 91 YS or something. What we're going to be doing from time to time, whenever the weather permits and the weather looks like it's really not cooperating much at all in the last week, we're going to try to get to the field, upgrade our learning and technology using the Zetron, getting the Satos to run the way we want, and sharing all the information with Bob Zambelli, who already has our Max 70 in the Red Baron and flying it every day. We certainly learned a lot in the last year from the Miss Ashley project, and we are going to use that as a foundation to build on and push the envelope even further in the future. Now, just one other thought, the plane that we've been doing our testing on, Tradition, which was one of the planes built in '86. When it was pristine, it won the Concourse Award, and it has gone on to serve many as a multi-purpose airplane. Engine test stand, throttle test stand, and many people have enjoyed flying it. But the point to keep in mind is when I build a plane or design a plane, it's made for very extremely hard service and long life, so it's usually overbuilt and over-engineered by some degree. But the side benefit of that is when the planes get to be 15 and 17 years old, nothing wears out on them. There's the paint, the finish from crashing it is the only part. If we wanted to fly this at a major event, I think we could refinish the fuselage in a matter of a week, strip the paint off, and the wings are still in real nice shape. And you could be thinking, well, why don't you just fly one of the Spitfires? Why go and build a whole new plane? Well, it's because I like building these things. I really enjoy a winter here in New Jersey is a cold, miserable time of year. Usually rainy, damp, cold. And having a nice warm cup of coffee and getting down to the shop early and staying late, it is one of the things I really enjoy. Looked forward to this project for so long, and today is the day. We're actually going to cut our first piece of wood. We're going to go out there and start to frame up the crutch for our fuselage plug. Anyway, here we are. This is Paul Winter's motor. Now mine should arrive from Ken Clapson very soon. I want to take the first thing is measure out the motor mounts spacing. Again, I'm going to use the motor mounts on their side. I want to do this relatively accurately. We're not even going to use these. We're going to use a carbon piece that's molded in the final fuselage, just like Miss Ashley. But this will make us a nice, accurate crutch, and I'm going to leave the mounts as long as possible, just to keep the curvature in the fuselage. Use the mounts as a jig, kind of, to make the plug. The easiest thing I know of is just use an ice pick, center it, just get a dot on there. We need an imprint. And the next thing would be to go to the drill press and drill that out for 632 screws. Now normally I would be putting motor mount pads on here, but I don't need to because I'm going to take that into account when I make up the mold for the carbon fiber part. Remember, this is just a plug part. Now if we were making a crutch that we were going to use, we would for sure be putting aluminum pads on this, especially because the 4 strokes, even more than 2 strokes, the mounting pads are very small on these engines. But for our purposes, this will be, in essence, the motor will never run in this crutch, but we still want to maintain exact and true alignment. What I always try to do is tighten these equally. Again, if you chose not to use pads, if this were the way you were going to build a regular crutch, these eventually sink right in. See how small a mounting pad is on this relative to a 2-cycle? I'm not sure I understand the engineering there, but if you're going to use a wood crutch, I would highly recommend aluminum, hardened aluminum pads, and big footprint, the 632 bolts with big footprints. With the bolts just about a little more than hand tight, because my eyes are so bad, I put a piece of tape on the ruler. I'm using my thumb as a dead stop, and I'm measuring that I'm about 1 line into the green, and then I can go down as I do this. And this needs to go in just a little bit before I cut the wood. Now normally if I was making a real crutch, I'm in by one line actually. If I was making a real crutch, I would put the wood with the grain going this way, because this is just a part that we're going to use as a plug. I can put the grain in any direction. What I decided to do, rather than even put wood in between here because we don't need it, I'll put the wood where the tank shim would be. That'll allow me to kind of envision where this tank shim should be. And again, I want to use my ruler. I just have this tacked on. Best always to tack it on. Might help to use the right side of the ruler. What I want to do is just one tack here will hold this. And then I want to check the whole length. Once I get that right, and I know it's accurate, I can run the whole glue seam. Now one thing that's handy to have, and you can buy it for about I don't know, about $6 on Home Depot, $10 maybe. I don't really remember. It's not an expensive tool to have when you make crutches. Is this little vise, and if we were going to, say for instance, put the wood in between, this would allow us to get a clamp very conveniently on that. So we don't need it right now because of this technique. And because we're not really going to use this for a motor mount crutch, but this allows us to replicate it very quickly. Now I'll trim the extra off with the saw. We'll be ready to put the final cuts on that and then check that it's in good alignment. Trim off all the extra wood, of course. This is an easy way to just get the mark on it. And when I have a cut like this, I always want to leave the line on and trim the rest off. Just use the last little bit with this belt sander. I'd rather do it this way than with a knife, because I really don't think, I think you have a better chance of getting a 90-degree cut this way. Just leave the last little bit of wood on there. Cut you get by doing it that way. You don't get all that ragged edge. went through the half-inch wood, used up the heaviest of the pieces I had, a part that never would make it into a final plane, but for making a plug, it's fine. Worth its weight in gold. One of the things we know, for instance, and by the way, let me run this backwards a little bit in case you've missed one of the previous tapes. We tried some of these Tower hobby spinners. No good. They pull the pins out and they strip and everything. These are the best of the ones that weigh about an ounce that I've found. 2 1/4 inches the size spinner we're going to hopefully be able to use. And I'd like to get, because I need to get special nuts made for the Sato, it's a metric size. Don't have the nuts here yet, so we're going to go with pretty much a plastic spinner until we can replace this with either aluminum or something with all the hardware right. But this will get us close enough. And what I want to show is, I want to get a, and this is real easy to do, real easy. Everything is easy until you go to do it. Putting that curve in the front, even though it's a plug, what it'll mean is I don't have to carve this away. I don't have to carve motor mount. Now what it is, I can get this much, and now I need to put that in a minus 1/8. Let me get some of the old good old 1/8 tape, and I can kind of simulate this, and I can do this on a grindstone. If it's going to end here and I have a 1/8 inch fuselage sides, again, this is just a rough interpolation. This doesn't need to be real accurate right now because we can use the balsa wood to do the fine tuning. We want to make this really on the minus side. Now I can move the tape several times if I want to. But what this should do is keep me from having to take a whole lot of hardwood with motor mounts into account. I'd like to make it as, well, I'd like to make it as little as possible. And if you're doing a real crutch, this is a real good way to do it. Okay, so this is going to be the outside. This is going to be the inside now. So what I need to do is work off the inside. And I ought to just put this so this actually physically maintains the contour. Try to look through my eye. Little mind's eye here. You know, this is going to take a little back and forth until I'm happy with it. I'm going to have to just say, well, the tape lets you look at. See, I want to get that. I don't want to have this go. Now that means the 1/8 inch fuselage side would carry me to there. Again, this is just the roughest of interpolations. Now there's also another way to do this, and I'll show that even though we don't really need to do it. It's just a good way to do it. This is one way, and a little more sophisticated way is to make a pattern. What you can do is, in this case, I folded the paper. I know this is where it's going to basically wind up, and I need to wind up back there. So now I need to connect the dots. What I'm doing is sighting down the spinner itself. See, if I were to do it this way, you can see it'd be wrong, and if I go this way, it's going to have too much of a curve. So I'm sliding this curve in until I pick up that angle. I'm going to guess it's right about there. But I can make any amount of these patterns that I need. Now once I have that, because it's double, and if you wanted to really be cute, you could make this, once you get the pattern exactly the shape you want, you can make a permanent piece out of 64th plywood for future planes. And now because it's a mirror image, both sides should be equal. So what the objective here is that we get a nice smooth contour. Just remember that Typhoon nose is really wide. Now it looks like this is going to be spaced up. It looks like we've got it pretty close. But now I need to undersize this, and it's real easy to do that. Just undersize it by the size of the fuselage. Take an 1/8 inch off one side, and we've got it. And this part you can even do by eye because it's not real critical. What we're trying to do is maintain that curve, so that that curve from all angles, that curve would be relatively smooth. The next thing I want to do is just rough saw most of this off, and then the final little bit I'll do with the belt sander. And this should, in essence, give us a very close contour without all the extra work involved once we get the fuselage sides on there. Here's the amount you can cut off conveniently, but I want to make sure once I do one cut, I want to come back and kind of look at that angle. Seems like I could dress a little more off here, just a bit. Anytime you're going to cut motor mounts, it's a good idea to put a fresh blade in, needless to say. Again, a lot of this is interpolation. You just have to go back and forth till you get it right. The line on in most of the spots here just to play it safe, so I don't have to wind up adding material there if possible. Now once I put the 1/8 inch sides on this, looks like I've got a relatively good, well, doesn't, and this kind of thing doesn't have to be perfect, but can you imagine when you're trying to sand and blend these edges? Boy, is it a nightmare. Okay, so that crutch is pretty well in alignment. We've checked it, put it on a flat table, make sure it doesn't have any twists, sight it, look down it. This is what happens when you don't use aluminum pads. We've only put this engine in and out a few times, and look, it's already got an indentation there. It's already losing its alignment in every dimension. Never make a permanent motor crutch without putting those aluminum pads on. Boy, and this is really rock hard maple, but boy, look how quick that dents right in. Because the force you have is tremendous. Just tremendous. Here's the thing that happens with the Sato. The thrust is just a little bit wider than the piece they relieve it for in the back here. So what I need to do is just take, oh God, just a couple of thousandths off of this. Just the edges here. Now in the future when we make these pieces up, I'll make this a little bit thinner. That'll just make it easier. I can take 30 thousandths or so off of that edge. Bob is making up that special piece that has 2 bolts in it. We're going to wait for that to come back, but for right now, this is Paul's engine. I can just take a little bit off of this back plate and that'll let that sit right back on there the way it should. So this is what I have to get the material removed away just as a temporary measure so that it fits on that shaft size until we get the piece back from Zambelli. And that gives us the clearance to get it snugged up and get our clearance on the front here just right. Next thing is they give you one of these little adapters which just fits. You got to take the little edge off it. And this centers the spinner perfectly. As I said, they fit perfectly. Try putting them on. You got to really press these suckers on. Again, we're looking for other spinner options, but right now this will get us through. Once you have that on, then that self-centers this. It's a nice tight fit too. Famous last words. What is, I put a little lip on that from pressing it on there. But anyway, I need to get this on there nice and tight, and then I need to set this clearance right here. And then make up the nose ring. What I want to do is I want to set the clearance right here. And I'll just take the motor out of the crutch and set this up at, I want to have at least a 30-second clearance, and I want to allow for an 1/8 inch nose ring, so I need an 1/8 plus a 30-second material off of there. So that's the amount of material we need to take off. Now, we can take a nice saw cut right up to the line and do the last little bit on the grindstone. Okay, that establishes the clearance roughly. Now we're going to make up the nose ring. Well, actually we're going to make half of a nose ring. And then we're going to try to set this clearance at about a 32nd of an inch. And what we'll do is just take a little material off each side until we get exactly the clearance. But the objective here is that this, because the motor is in alignment, it'll hold this in the perfect place so that when we join the fuselage sides and when we join the block and we do all the joining, this will be in pretty good alignment, and we can use that nose ring as a guide for carving it in. I'm just taking a tracing of this. This is an old Vico backplate, because we're not going to be really using this. It's just convenient because the spinner has notches out of it. I want to make sure we're at the same diameter, and it looks like we are. This also gives me the center point. Now, what I need to do, I need to cut this, because this is 16th plywood, I'm going to laminate it with the grain going in 2 different directions just to make it a little bit stronger. And I can pretty much just go right through the center here. This part of it does not have to be, we just missed that. I'm trying to look through the camera lens, my own fault. That looks a little more like it. We use this line here. I'll join these together so that I have 1/8 inch plywood. And get some free strength by, see that the grain is going this way in this piece. I want to make the grain go the opposite way. This is just free strength. Even though it's a plug, it'll give us a little more room to work off. When I use this piece will be my guide, and then I'll make sure I have a perfect match to the spinner. See, it's a little bit oversized because don't forget we're working off an angle. If you make this straight, it comes up. I need to make it just a little bit oversized. That's one piece we can put aside. We've made this up in a very short block of time. And we got some parts made for our future, what's going to amount to be the plug for this Typhoon. Just used up a little block of time. And so this morning, in roughly maybe an hour or so, we've taken this block of time that normally we either spend in bed or whatever, have 10 extra cups of coffee. We have 2 parts ready. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to use these little blocks of time to make parts, so when it comes time that I get a whole day, I can assemble or move forward on putting this particular thing together, which will become the plug for our molded carbon fiber fuselage. Whenever I make a part that's going to ultimately wind up being part of the final model, or a molded part, I want to go back and look at the real aeroplane to see that I've got the curves right or the shape right. Believe it or not, the plastic spinner has a little more realistic curve in the front than the Vico ones that we have, or the modern ones. Really important to look at the top view and see how that curve blends into the spinner, and it's a very short nose. The real plane, you can see actually the cylinders went out over the wing. Now we're not going to be able to do that, of course, but that is a a pretty good replication of how that nose just blends into the spinner. And the bottom, a good look at how the bottom of the scoop looks and how the gear tuck in. Again, we can only replicate it up to a certain point, and then we have to just, you know, we can't make a 2-inch nose movement on here. And I think we're going to be able to get this to have the look that we want, and yet it won't be, it will not be in a class with Al's planes where they're really scale. But it'll be fun to compare drawings anyway. I don't know about you, but I think that nose section is going to make a great stunt ship. That'll really be an unusual thing. Today we have another little block of time, amazingly enough here. And I wanted to, I'm looking around, one of the other parts I can make up, I can lay out the fuselage sides. Now one of the things, by moving the wing down from the traditional place, what we're doing actually is redoing where the wing goes in the fuselage by a small amount. It gives us more prop clearance, and the gear don't have to be quite as long. It also, in effect, raises the tail because we're going to use the top of the fuse side as a place to mount the tail. So what we've done is I've taken Elliot's drawing and I've sketched it all out on paper. And I've laid out the dimensions on my pieces of 1/8 inch wood, and I have what I hope is going to be the right dimension. Again, I'm taking a wild guess. Now what I did, I took tradition, checked the vertical CG, basically the same size shape plane, and by moving the wing down just a little bit, I'm hoping I'm going to get the vertical CG just about right. Again, this ship will have larger wheels, more prop clearance, and in essence, the lower wing, the little bit lower wing, will make for a plane that we hope is just going to have a little more of a scale look. Now, that's what we're going to try to do in the next hour or so. I'm weighing up each piece of wood, and what I'm going to take is the 2 heaviest pieces, because this is never going to become an aeroplane, so I may as well use up the 2 heaviest C-grain pieces I have. These are all like 39, 40 grains. So I can save the lightest ones. It's pointless to use the lightest ones on a mold or on a plug. And also what I would do at this point in time is just eliminate any that are twin. Now look at this pile here. You can see these 2 here, these 3. We don't want to use those ever for anything like a real part. I'd also, if you look at these pieces, there's some that have a banana bow in them. Well, and that's these 2 here. We don't want those either. So I can kind of eliminate this down to certain pieces. This one's got a twist in it too. Okay, now we have all the pieces weighed. Lightest piece at one end, heaviest pieces at the other. There's quite a bit that are in the 40 range, so we're just going to use those up. Anything for making a plug, we can use the heavier wood. If we're going to actually make like a fuselage, Mike's going to be making a fuselage real soon, we'll use the lighter wood. It's very difficult to get 4-inch by 48-inch wood that's perfect for what we want to use it for. Lay anything out on here, what I want to do is get perfectly straight edges. This is not an ordinary ruler, this is a steel, a relatively high precision ruler. And when I lay it out on the edge, of course, the wood tends to be not exactly perfect. So what I'm going to do is lay out, take about a 1/16 off, and that'll be my positive side, the side that I'll do all my referencing off for right now. A real good investment, by the way, and these are about $50. This is a precision ruler. Steel, I don't even know who makes it. Midgley got me this ruler. But it's relatively straight. It doesn't have a tendency to bow. Now I always check it against, make sure it's nice and straight, because this is going to be my reference line here. I want to make sure I have one perfectly straight edge. Now, obviously I'll do it to the other side also, but without that straight edge as a reference, I'm always going to be working off building an angle into this. Always want to have that one edge at least straight at this time, because we're going to put angles and edges on the other side, but to have an edge that's perfectly straight to a precision ruler. Thing we have to do is, off Elliot's drawing, figure out exactly how we want the cowl parting lines to be. We're going to have a straight line for the take apart feature, an angled line. This piece will be removable, so if we decide to mount batteries or servos in here, and we need to come up, because the cowl is in unusual shape, we need to come up with what amounts to be a parting line here, so we can get in at that. And I haven't figured out whether that's going to come back. Now here's a couple of things I needed to do. I needed to lower the back of this fuse side about, well, some amount anyway, and redraw that curve, for the simple reason is I'm going to be lowering the wing about 1/4 inch, not sure exactly how much yet, but I redrew all the parting lines in the cowling, because I'd like this to be a separate piece with a little bit of extra material up here. I can put my attachment pins up here, which will be real handy. And I'm hoping I'm going to somehow be able to figure out where the brake line is, so that the muffler outlet will be on a brake line. We still need to engineer that up a little bit. And from the original drawing, I'm going to be, and I don't know the exact amount, probably between 1/8 and 1/4 inch, just lowering the wing. That'll give me more area up here. It'll make, in effect, the tail above the wing, which is one of the features I like. And I need to redraw this when I get the final back end done. But everything else that Elliot's drawn here is really nicely proportioned. And there's a golden rule I always use, is always have this dimension and this dimension a 1/2 inch less. And if you make that a 1/2 inch less, the plane always looks good in level flight. If you make constant lines, what happens, it always looks like the plane, I don't know what, it's an optical illusion or whether the plane actually flies that way, but always had that 1/2 inch, roughly a 1/2 inch up in the back. Anyway, now we're ready to transpose this using a ruler out onto the fuselage sides. Get some idea how that scoop is going to confine that. This is what's good about, now in essence, I'm making up a kit here. See, what I'm trying to do is get the parting line right on the exhaust. And it's really helpful. Elliot has really done a nice job of proportioning these. And it's, when I look at it from far away, I've taken this and laid it out. The only part of it is I need to adjust that taper coming up. And that's a trade-off. We can't make it really as scale as we'd like to, because I know if this has too much of a rake, the plane is going to look like it's flying with the tail high. And it doesn't accent the maneuvers then exactly the way I would like. But pretty much what we've done is, through good time management, we've not wasted any real critical building time. And I'll be able to make these fuse sides up before the day is out. I just transpose all the numbers onto the wood. So in essence, next week when we go to make a, well, we're going to start making an aeroplane next week. But having this all laid out in full scale here is such a big help. And I always like to use different color marker pens to denote what lines go where. Again, we don't have to use good balsa wood. We use the heaviest wood we have, because this is just going to be a plug for a carbon fiber part. One of the critical things, and I've gone back and changed it a few times, I moved the parting line, because I want the parting line to go right through the middle of the exhaust. I don't want to have it that I'll have an egg-shaped hole here, if possible. So I've laid it out from the top and from the front, and then reoriented the parting line to come closer. And it's little things like this that need to be addressed. Like this is one of them, and the taper in that angle, and that little lip on the bottom, which we may have to adjust. Anyway, this is one of the good things before I actually physically make a fuse side. I want to have this exactly the way I want it. Okay, we finally got one fuselage side laid out in full scale. Now I'll use this one to trace onto the other one, and then I'll make an exact pattern right on Elliot's plan here. But this is just one more little step we get ahead before we actually start construction. We're almost in effect, making a kit is what we're doing. I locate that. That's one of the key things. Obviously, the whole motor is going to fit right in here. Really nice. So far, haven't spent a lot of time. Little bits and pieces of that. And this is what's good. I always have the book right next to me to kind of look. See like the droop part of this rudder. Not sure I have that curve right, but we can work on that. Now we got the fuse sides made up. Actually, these are just kit parts we've made up. Kind of have a little finalization on the drawing, and early next week, as soon as we get caught up on other things around the shop, we actually will start putting this fuselage together, which will then become our plug. And since we've already made a full carbon fiber fuselage, I don't expect we'll run into more than the usual amount of problems you have when you run into anything new. When I made that fuselage, that was pretty challenging, but this one should be, well, to some degree a little bit easier, and we hope that we'll learn something along the way. We'll be able to pass it on to you. So all I can really say is thanks for joining us. Please share the tapes, as we always say. Please answer the phone. Hey, gotta answer the phone. A really cool thing happened today. I just gotta pass this on to you. This is really funny. Warren Walker, who has the Magnum 4-stroke, actually, it's one I had sent him to do some testing on. He was at the field flying today, and he was happy with the motor. But we were talking about it, and he's got a cell phone. If we were talking about trimming a plane, you know, he's in California, it's sunny, I'm here, it's snowing, and we got a cell phone connection. We're trimming his plane via the internet. I think that's so cool. Happens while Warren and I are on the phone, his buddy crashes the plane right. I can hear the crash in the background. Well, you can't make this stuff up. We're now starting what I hope is going to be, I mean, years from now, it'll be a blockbuster plane for me. This is one I'm really going to put my heart and soul into like no other one. And with the help of all the talented people, Elliot, Warren, Wayne Triven, too many people to mention, everybody. It's fun being part of a winning team. I think we're really going to be able to, well, we're going to learn something in the process and have a great time here in the shop, and we hope you'll enjoy joining us. And from time to time, when the weather permits, we'll get out to the field and fool with the throttle and fool with the Z-Tron and whatever. But in the meantime, hey, it's going to be a great year. And if Peeps is with us for the next year, Peeps is going to be part of this project. Peeps, if you only knew how famous you are. Internationally famous bird. If we could only get him to wear a diaper, it would be so nice. Anyway, it's been fun. And he just never lets us live, no matter who's in the shop. They have to tolerate him. And we'll be learning some things about the Sayo and the Laser and the Magnum. George Aldrich is now a Magnum dealer, and we hope he's going to be contributing. Bob Zambelli's got about 100 people on the website already, and of course we're updating the website every day. Information about the Typhoon, even if you're not watching the videos, will be updated daily on my website in the chat room. Figure something better to do with your winter afternoons? I haven't. This is just about as good as it gets when you live here in the Northeast. And we hope a year from now, as we look back at the Miss Ashley project and see how much we've learned, I hope we're going to be looking back at the Typhoon project and learning even more. And most of all, being able to share it with everybody in a very convenient format. And thanks to Paul Winner for letting us use your engine, Paul. And don't forget, coming soon, the Blodak Strega kit. Every reason Remember, it wasn't that long ago that we were working on a Brodak Cardinal, and here it is, a very, very popular kit.
Feel so down and out, then we'd never know it when we won. You can be what you need to.
And we will see you on the next tape. Again, just thanks a lot for joining us. And if you think life gets much better than this, well, I don't know, maybe yours does. This is about as good as it gets.